Hello, everybody. So the presentation is going to be, as you can see, about collecting medieval swords, or to be more precise, collecting medieval swords replicas. Because medieval sword itself might be very expensive and probably not in very good shape, having survived 500, 600 years of history today. So why collecting swords? Well, at least why I started collecting swords. It's because a sword is not just a weapon, it has a lot of symbolism attached to it. It's a symbol of power. It's sometimes in the myth and legends, swords have magical properties. It's a status symbol because back in the Middle Ages, knights couldn't afford, or at least normal people couldn't afford a sword. It was a very expensive tool. So it bestowed an aura of exclusivity on its owner. And in all these properties are reflected in today's culture through many movies or fantasy literature, video games featuring Middle Ages and the use of swords. During this presentation, to hopefully make the presentation a little bit more interactive and interesting, I've set up something that's called the movie challenge. So basically, I'll show you an image of a movie where a sword is featured. So, and you will have to guess the title of the movie and possibly the name of the sword. Then, if you think you know the answer, raise your hand as fast as possible. The first person who raises their hand will give the answer, and we'll see if they get it right. So, I've always been interested in swords from very early age. Maybe some of you weren't even born back then. I was 15. This is a picture taken in Wales. Through the high school times, I look like a real nerd, but it felt good. And up to nowadays, with my family in Rekoyaplatz. So, let's start with the first movie challenge. This is an easy one, we'll start easier. So be ready. Hold on, you're not supposed to say. You raise your hands first, I think. Okay. Yes. I think, yeah, either one is a good guess. And do you know, can you name the name of the sword? Can anybody name the... Sting. Sting, yes, like the singer. So, you win a little sword yourself. Can you pass it to him? And one for you as well, because you you guessed the name of the sword right. Okay, maybe, but if you can help me delivering the swords next time, it's going to be easier. So, okay, let's take a look at the anatomy of a medieval sword. We have one here, and I'll use it as an example. We have a blade. Yeah, so far so good. Possibly a fuller, which is a groove into the blade. Not all the swords have a fuller, but most do. A crossguard, grip, a pommel, and the part including crossguard, grip, and pommel is usually called hilt, and the point, which serves to stub. Crossguard, the function of the crossguard is to give a better grip to the sword so that your hand wouldn't slide along the blade, and also to protect your hand for other blades. When you're in a combat, your opponent's blades will stop here and it won't chop your fingers, which is always a good thing. This is what a crossguard looks like. They come in a variety of different types and shapes. They all share one characteristic. They have a hole because they have to slide onto the blade tang. So the blade typically extends into the grip. So into this grip, there's a part of the blade that is thinner, and the pommel, the grip, and the crossguard slide on top of it. Pommel also, in different swords, can come in a variety of shapes and forms. The function of the pommel is to keep this whole construction together, so it blocks the grip from sliding off. You know, there is a little, in this case, there is a little block that doesn't let the thing slide out. But it also counterweights the blade, because the blade obviously is the heaviest part of the sword, and the pommel functions as a little counterweight on the other hand. Last but not least, the pommel can be used to strike your opponent. I think in some extreme cases, but it's been reported in manuals from the Middle Ages, a particular technique that's called the martyr strike, which implies you hitting your opponent in the face with the pommel. It's not a nice thing to do, but you know, yeah, you're fighting for your life there, so you're going to use every single mean to survive. Mordhau is the German name of this technique. So the pommel is kept in place by pinning it, which means, you know, this little bit that comes out, it's part of the blade. It's called the tang. And basically what you do to keep the pommel in place is to hit the tang and hammer it down so it blocks the pommel in place. And this is what it looks like once you've been hammering it down. This type of construction is slightly different, but I'll show you a pinned pommel on this sword. This is a two-hand sword. You see it's been hammered down. This has been smoothed out as well, so it fits nicely with the pommel, but this is technically and practically, this is part of the blade that it's been hammered down. As you can see, there are different ways to keep the hilt together. One is the pinning, as I say. Another one is a threaded hilt. So this part of the blade has got a thread on the end, so you can screw the pommel on top of it, which in my opinion is not the most historically accurate way of doing it, but it's very handy because if you're using your sword in combat reenactments, for example, and the grip comes a little bit loose and start rattling, it's much easier to tighten it up if you have a threaded hilt rather than having to hit the tang again and hammer it down again, which requires specific instruments and a swordsmith, most likely. All right, another movie challenge. Get ready. It's an easy one. Anatoly?
I remember the name of the sword, but it's Game of Thrones.
Anybody who knows the name of the sword? Who said that? Okay. That's correct. So, one is for Anatoly, and one.
Give me the entire box.
Yeah, I guess. And one for Dimitri. At the end of the game, we'll see who collected more swords, and there'll be a little prize.
One more sword.
Yeah. One of the swords will be given away. So yes, it is Game of Thrones. It was a pretty iconic image. Let's see how the grip is made, the part that you use to hold the sword. So I'll show you quickly. This is a series of slides. It's made of wood. So you can carve two pieces of wood that will fit together, like this. Then you slide them onto this part of the sword is called the tang. All right. So this is part of the blade, actually. So you fit these two pieces of wood on top of the tang. It looks very rough, very sharp angles. So you need to smooth it down. You smooth it down with a file. Then you wrap it with cord, which helps keeping these two pieces of wood together. They are glued anyway, but this is an extra measure of security. And the cord also provides an extra texture for the grip. And then you can wrap the whole thing in leather. You can also glue the leather or sew it around the cord. And this is what the final result look like. You can dye the leather in different colors or put razors. For example, this sword has got a few razors here. These razors actually improve the grip of the sword so it doesn't slide. Let's see what this is about. Ready? Very good. Anybody knows the name of the sword? No. I didn't know this one. I had to look it up myself. It's called the Atlantean sword. But there goes your cocktail pick. So it is Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. Let's look at probably the most important part of the sword, which is the blade. This is a blade cross section. So if you cut the blade across, you can have different shapes depending on the different type of the sword. One thing to notice is the cross section of a sword varies along the length of the blade. So closer to the tip, it might look like a diamond. Closer to the cross guard, it might have a different shape depending on presence of the fuller or fullers, plural. One important thing to notice, and this is a sign of a well constructed sword, is that the blade tapers towards the point. And it not only tapers as a profile, as a shape. Tapering means basically that it starts wider and it ends narrower, all right? But it also, its thickness tapers. So it starts thicker and it ends thinner. And this is all meant to make the blade lighter, because of course by tapering you have less material towards the point of the sword, and to keep the weight of the blade closer to your hand. So the closer the point of balance of the blade is to your hand, the more manageable is the blade. It's easier to handle it. You know, conversely, if most of the weight is placed on the point of the blade will be very heavy to handle it. Some blades have a fuller, like this one, for example, has got a really nice fuller. The fuller is a groove in the middle of the blade, and the function of the fuller is mostly to keep the blade lighter without compromising its stability and hardness, right? You can reduce a well-done fuller can reduce the weight of a sword by 20 to 35%. Contrary to popular belief, it's not a blood groove, so it's not supposed, some people think that this part of the blade is meant to let the blood of your opponent come out when you stab them. But that's just not true, that's rubbish. You don't keep your sword into your opponent long enough for the blood to come out of your fuller. You likely, if you have stabbed it once, you want to stab it twice as quickly as possible. All right, so in this picture we can see a few different type of fullers. There's a double fuller on the top, single fuller, a very short fuller on the bottom. These are different type of swords. If you want to start collecting swords, this is a bit technical, but Oakeshott Types basically are, it's a typology system thought by this Edward Oakeshott, which is widely regarded as one of the preeminent scholars of the medieval swords. He collected and classified a huge number of swords and came out with different types, which are based on the length of the blade, shape of the blade, presence of a fuller or multiple fullers, the length of the grip, and so on. So when you collect swords, most likely when you buy them, they are classified type 12, type 13A, and so on. So you know exactly, what you're getting. And we have another movie challenge. Let's see this one.
Sword in the Stone, it's Excalibur.
Very well, very well. That's correct. Here we go. Can you give it to him? Thanks. Yeah, it is A Sword in the Stone. It's an old Disney movie, I think, before CG times. Let's take a look at the evolution of the medieval sword through time. What we can see is basically that from the early Middle Ages, the sword, the Viking Norman sword, had a larger blade, a big fuller, a small crossguard. And then as the type of armor, because the evolution of the sword is very tightly tied to the evolution of the armors, because you have to fight against opponents with different types of armor. And armor evolved in a way that people were start using towards the end of the Middle Ages, like full plate metal armors. So swords started to get more ability to pierce, to thrust, whereas the Viking Norman sword was mostly a cutting weapon, as in slashing weapon. One of the latest types, the Estoc, is it's not even sharp. It's just a very pointy piece of metal, which was designed to penetrate these plate armors, possibly in the joints where the weak part of the armor is. And as you can see, also the length of the blade went up in time. This is obviously this gives a warrior an advantage. The longer the blade, the easier it is to reach your opponent. So yeah, here we can see a close-up of the different types. This is Viking swords, knightly swords. These one-handed knightly swords. These are two-handed swords. A long sword on the left. A claymore is a Scottish type of two-handed sword. It's a very long blade and it's quite heavy as well. And here you can see how the grip length changes, whether you are supposed to use a sword with one hand, with two hands, or in the case of the what's called the bastard sword, you can use it both with one hand or two hands. In the case of two hands, your second hand would hold the pommel as well. And then we have the huge Zweihander, definitely a two-handed sword, huge blade, very long, and this was used to fight against pole arms. You would typically swing it around you as in a helicopter motion to hit as many opponents as possible, which were most likely pointing at you, pole arms such as spears and halberds. This is a few specs for the Zweihander. It's impressive. The longest and heaviest Zweihanders recorded can be as long as 2.1 meters and as heavy as 6.6 kilograms. And you can see what it looks like compared to a human being, possibly quite short human being. And this is another one. So they're massive. All right, get yourself ready. Yeah, it starts getting harder.
Was it from the Monty Pythons?
Nope. Nobody?
It's Excalibur, but
Who said that?
remember the movie.
Okay, the sword is Excalibur. Huh?
The movie is Excalibur.
Very good, Stefano. The movie is Excalibur. And it's a very good movie, actually. Okay, so one for you. And one for you. You're starting to collect quite a lot then. All right. What to look at when buying your first sword? Or how to tell the difference between a sword and an SLO? Anybody knows what SLO means?
Sword-like object.
That's correct. A sword-like object. It's something that is shaped as a sword, but it's not functionally a sword. So, for reference, this is an SLO. This is a sword that it's not supposed to be used in battle because it's way too heavy. I personally don't know how the hilt it's been built, so it might be weak enough to break, if I actually hit something with it. But it looks good on a wall. It's a nice decorative item, we should say.
Sword replicas are also not used for combat, so how do you differentiate a sword replica from an SLO?
Yes. Well, replicas depends. If it's a proper battle-ready replica, you can use it for practical fighting. But this is what this chapter is about: is how to tell the difference. First difference: full tang versus rat tail tang. This is a very, very fundamental difference. This is a full tang. The tang is this part of the blade, This is a full tang because it extends all the way from the end of the blade up to the pommel, right? And it's part of the blade. That's the thing to keep in mind. Full tang, full tang, full tang. They're all full tangs. This is a really nice sword. It's Glamdring, the sword of Gandalf. It's produced by United Cutlery, licensed from the Lord of the Rings. It looks great. It's got lots of fine details into it. It's about €300 worth if you buy it from Amazon. But when we take a look under the hood, this is how the hilt is constructed. You don't see a full tang anymore. You see what we call a rat tail tang. It's basically a thin piece of metal that's wielded on top of the sword, right? And it's threaded so that you can screw things on top of it. The pommel, you can screw the pommel on top of it. But because it's welded and it's because it's so thin, it's a very weak part of the blade. So if you actually hit something, right, and the shock is transferred into the handle, this might break. So it's a great sword to look at, to hang on your wall, but you probably don't even want that to swing that around, let alone actually hitting something with it. These are other examples of full tangs. You can see the wielding here. So this material is not even steel or carbon steel. They are very weak part. So the moral of the story is no rat tail things. So if you want to get something that you think to use, even just for cutting tests, get a full tang sword. The steel type is also important. Normally, sword-like objects, SLOs or wall hangers, are made of stainless steel. Stainless steel is perfect for your kitchen knives, but anything above 30 centimeters or length is going to be very brittle, which means fragile. You want to get a sword made of carbon steel. Carbon steel, it's more resistant and more importantly can be heat treated and it's flexible. You will find different kind of carbon steels. They're usually identified by numbers. The most common used for commercial swords are 1045, 1060, 1095. The last two digits indicate the percentage of carbon into the steel. So for example, 1045 indicates 0.45% of carbon into the steel. And where this comes into play in practical terms is that it makes a blade flexible. So real swords flex. And why is that important? Is because when you hit something with a sword, right, you want the shock to be absorbed by the flexibility of the sword, otherwise the blade will break. And we have another movie challenge. Okay, I don't remember all of them, so let's see what this one is. This one. Yes, but I think Dimitri raised his hand first. Huh? Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. Okay, I'll give you a cocktail pick each. But I see where this is going. Okay. So it's Braveheart, and it's the Wallace longsword. Okay, and one last thing to keep in mind when buying a sword is the heat treatment. It's basically a blade is heat treated, meaning that it's put in a forge, brought up to about 800 centigrade degrees, and then quenched in a bucket full of either water or oil. And why this is important, what does this do to the blade? I'm going to try and explain it quickly. This is a katana, so it's not an European medieval sword, but all I want you to take away from this picture is the katana cross section, okay, which is a bit more like a triangle kind of thing. And here there is a quick explanation why heat treatment is important for a blade. So basically what happens, we have a graph with time 0 on the top, and then 5 seconds down the line after this blade has been quenched. What happens is that the thinner part of the blade, this cools down first, as you can see. and then gradually this part cools down and this part cools down, and after 5 seconds the whole thing has cooled down. But because this cooled down very quickly, the crystal structure of the steel here makes it harder. So we get the hardness of the sword exactly where we want it, on the blade edge. That's supposed to be the hardest part because that's what's gonna cut. Because this part cools down later, its structures allows for more flexibility. So it's less hard, but more flexible. So it gives the flexibility of the sword where we want to have it, in the body of the sword. Another movie challenge. Highlander. Anybody who remembers the name of this sword? To be honest, I don't remember. I wrote it down, so if nobody knows the name, it's fine, because I wouldn't be able to tell if it's right or wrong. But you say the Highlander first, I guess. And there you go.
Don't kill me.
All right. A quick word about a price of a medieval sword replica. As you can see, the price range is quite broad, but I wouldn't advise to get anything under 120, 130 euro. Of course, the more you spend, the better sword you get for a variety of parameters. Better polishing, better attention to details, or type of steel, and so on. Very high quality swords can be very expensive, like museum replicas. Swords that are supposed to be purchased by museums can go up to anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 euros. Okay, now we got a little video. Unfortunately, there's no audio, but this video sort of like shows the difference between sword-like objects and real swords. I'll see if I can play it. Okay, went to YouTube. Unfortunately, there's no audio, but you can see the consequences of buying a cheap sword. It just fell apart.
It's more dangerous.
And it's dangerous, absolutely. You can hit somebody, you can hurt yourself.
So it's a surprise attack.
Yeah, but it's a one-time surprise attack. And he didn't even hit the bottle.
He defeated the boss.
Yeah. I wouldn't even do that with a real sword.
He had another.
Yeah, this is something that happened during a TV sale. This actually was they had to call the ambulance. I mean, you can't hear the audio, but
Banana.
yeah, that's a katana defeated by a banana. And this guy's still hurting. Now, if you can even chop a bunch of snow, that's definitely not a good blade. That's a pumpkin.
Bend the sword.
Yeah. You bent the blade. This is a typical cut test. You usually cut water bottles. This is a pretty good looking blade. It's a fantasy sword, but look what happens when you try and bend it. And this is still the sales guy, still recovering from the blow.
Try another one.
It's only $50.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that's why you shouldn't try to save money when buying a sword. So can you see that? Okay. Let me see if I can go to the next slide. Okay, next slide is another movie challenge. Get yourself ready.
No, Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Anybody knows the name of the sword?
It's the sword of Gryffindor or something.
Who said that first? Somebody said that first.
Huh?
It's the Gryffindor sword. Yes. All right. Vadim, can you please do the honors?
Okay, I will pass one.
All right. Finally, where to get swords? Where to buy them? As you can imagine, you can buy them online. What I would advise is always to get them from a European retailer or swordsmith. That's just because the cost of shipping from the United States is quite high. Sometimes can be almost as high as the price of the sword itself. Even though the United States have probably the most active market, there's a lot of choice there. But in Europe, you can look in on Amazon.de. Amazon.uk, because in the UK there's a lot of restrictions about owning swords, it's harder to find good swords on Amazon UK. And also eBay.co.uk is also a place where you can get some second-hand swords. Or European swordsmiths, you can try Regenier, Pavel Mock, Lutel. The last one, Lukas Mastelgoer, is a German swordsmith. It's a very good one, and he sells his sword for a pretty high price range. What to do when looking for a sword to buy? Research the swordsmith. If you haven't bought from this swordsmith before, read sword reviews about the swordsmith, ask around in dedicated forums. You can get second-hand swords to save a little money. You can find them on Facebook groups, on sword forums. And when buying a sword online, meaning not being actually able to see the item, always ask a lot of questions. Always make sure that all the boxes are ticked. For example, the hilt construction is a full tang. The steel type, you want the steel to be carbon steel, that it's been heat treated, tempered. The specs in terms of length, in terms of point of balance, as many pictures as you can get before committing to a purchase, which is normally quite an expensive purchase. And this is the end. Thank you for listening to me. Thanks. All right. Any questions?
How
Let's
did
go.
you get these swords to the office? I mean, did you walk around in the street?
Yes, on my horse. No, I just got. It's actually something that's supposed to hide them from the view, but I think this thing is actually more suspicious because this is a rifle bag. But anyway, I got them in this rifle bag in my car.
Aren't there any restrictions in Estonia?
You cannot walk around with a sword, but you can own a sword. You can own a sharp sword for either for personal purposes, like if you're training in a medieval sword fencing, or if you're collecting them. You don't need any special permit to own them. So yeah, and it's in terms of regulation, it's actually a better country than others. It's more permissive.
And I think this fighting knives even are restricted. So you can use usual knives, but if it's fighting, some special army, whatever.
Yeah, you're probably not allowed to carry it on yourself.
You
You
have to
can
have license.
probably hold it at home, have it at home. Yeah.
What was the graph of evolution of the swords?
Yeah, let me go down to that graph. There are some types, for example, we took a look at the claimer. This is a Scottish sword. This long sword, for example, on the left is a reproduction of an Italian long sword, which is kept in a museum in Brescia. Yeah, they can be recognized by area, even though across Europe they're pretty much the same. A German longsword will look very similar to an Italian longsword, for example. Of course, as you move east, the shape and some characteristics of the swords change, and you can tell it's an Eastern sword. Eastern swords are more typically are more curved. So you got scimitars, sabers, katanas, of course, in Japan.
And why is that? Do you know?
I think it depends on the type of armor that your opponent was using. So, for example, a curved sword wouldn't be very effective against a full metal plate armor, because you would slash like this, but being all covered in metal wouldn't do much. So it depends on the way the defense of the sword evolved in the meantime. But we have sabers in Europe as well, which is a curved sword. This is a very simplified graph. So it doesn't, by any means, it doesn't include all types of swords that we can find in medieval Europe. The graph will be a lot more complex and confused.
I understand you bought all your swords online, but are there any? Do you know of any swordsmiths in Estonia that we can visit, see what they do?
Actually, I met one lately at the Open Air Museum, and this guy lives in Estonia. He's from Latvia, but he's a swordsmith, and he makes helmets as well. He works with metal, so he can make swords as well. And he's pretty much the only person that I met that can produce.
Sounds like an open workshop that we can visit and see.
I'm trying to go there and visit it, but it seems very busy, and it's summertime, so it's not working much. But yeah, when I have more information, I can pass it to you if you're interested. Yeah. There are, for example, this Saaremaa Sepad, which is a shop that deals with wrought iron, which has some swords, but those are purely decorative. They're like very heavy piece of iron. It's not even steel. So.
You showed an image of Zweihanders, and one
Yes.
of them had the wavy
Yes.
structure, and it reminded me, I thought it was a flambeau.
Yeah, it's called the flamberge. Yeah, the wavy shape of the blade, it's meant to slice better, but it also cuts better pole arms, like a spear, something mounted on a stick of wood. It's better cut if the blade has got this sort of shape, as opposed to like a perfectly flat
The way
shape.
you swing it, you're supposed to pull, because if you just swing, then it's not a cutting motion, it's like a chopping motion.
Yeah, you're supposed to actually slide it against. Okay,
You
so
can use it as a saw, basically.
exactly. If this is a spear, let's say, you're supposed to do this motion so that all the waves start cutting through.
And also, because swords were expensive, I assume the blacksmiths were rich people.
Well, the thing is that they're expensive because it takes a lot of time to make them. So I think blacksmiths can only make them so many in a certain time. So if you sell a sword for, I don't know, 3,000 euro, you might do one per month, which is still good. So, but yeah, what I do know is that there are very few good swordsmiths around Europe, and they are very busy. So when you order a sword, you typically have a waiting line of months, like 3 to 6 months, sometimes a year. So you have to order far in advance, and they will make it for you. Any more questions?
What type is most popular
I think among collectionists, katanas are very popular, the Japanese swords. I think probably because of popular culture, pop culture, you know, it's very cool to see a katana, yeah. When it comes to European swords, probably this type will be the most popular one-handed swords, like a knightly sword.
Which ones are most expensive?
It depends on the swordsmith. There are some of them, you know, for example, there's this Albion sword maker in the States that's considered sort of like the Ferrari of the swords. They have 6 months waiting time, and they are quite expensive, typically above 1,000 euro. So, you know, it depends on, there are different brands, there are different swordsmiths. Usually the price is a good indication of the quality.
And I assume that the more expensive ones have more decorations.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. They can be even very simple, but they are constructed very well. You know, there's very good attention to details. There's no burn marks on the metal, for example. All the parts fit nicely. I don't have other swords to show it, but for example, this part, the pinning here, this is very clean, right? But for example, in an Albion sword, you will probably not even see it. It will be so smooth, they will be, you know, look like part of the pommel. I have other swords where you can actually see the hammer marks. So these kind of details make the difference between a quality sword and a cheaper sword.
It's so important nowadays that it would be well constructed, because you hardly go and.
No, you're right. And as a matter of fact, probably back in the Middle Ages was even less important, you know, because what you use the sword for is just for fighting. It's just, you know, when you're passionate about, you know, if you like cars, you would like, to move around, you just need like a nice little utilitarian car, but a Ferrari is much nicer, you know. I think it's my phone, so. You can turn it off. All right.
You see that Ferrari is beautiful, but you can't see how it's the construction inside.
Yeah. Well, the construction inside is one side, but there's also aesthetic parameters that you can judge a sword for. And it's not just about decoration. Sometimes it is about decorations. You know, there are some swords that are very well decorated. You know, you can see like a fine metal work, and those are more expensive because of that. But also simple swords, you can notice the attention to detail, you know, the beauty of the sword, without necessarily going and looking under the hood, if that makes sense.
But the ones that are meant for museums, which are not replicas, what is the price range?
Well, technically they're still considered replicas because they are not original medieval swords. Of course, mostly in museums you will see original swords from the Middle Ages. The price range of the replicas they go into the museum, as I said, it's around in the range of 5,000, 10,000 euro. So you can buy a car with that.
An original one, old.
A lot more. Yeah, depending on the state of conservation. Some of them, if you see medieval swords, they are like just like a rusted piece of metal. You can barely see that it was a sword once. But yeah, they do rust.
How many of them do you have
Oh,
in your collection?
I have, I think 9.
So a little army you can
A little, yes.
afford it.
Are they all
A little squad.
like swords or
No,
sword equivalents?
they are. Some of them are wall hangers. I started, you know, at the beginning, I didn't have a clear idea of what was the difference. So I got some of them that look very good, but they cannot be used as a real sword.
But as a collector, as I see, if you use a sword, it will get some marks and stuff. So it will lose in its cost. So
Mhm.
usually then even the both hangers.
Well, no, you can still use them. I mean, this sword, for example, it's got lots of dents in it. It's got lots of dents because it's been used. I bought this secondhand. I didn't make these dents myself. But you can use it. You can use it for. But as a matter of fact, because it's blunt, it's not sharp and it's got dents on it. You don't mind using it again. Whereas, like a new sword with a sharper edge, you don't want to ruin it. So some swords you keep them there, just because you like them and you don't want to ruin them. Some other swords you may get something a bit cheaper and actually use it in reenactment or medieval fencing.
Should the sides be sharp, like when you were like coating it like that, but should they really like?
Yeah, you can sharpen it. It can be sharpened.
It can be so sharp that you pull it and.
Yeah, it can be so sharp that you can slice through paper. It's a very expensive paper cutter, letter opener. But yeah.
When you say using the sword, what does it mean nowadays? I mean, you're not slicing up people. What do you do
No.
to slice them?
You can do cut tests, for example, and like some of these people in the video did, to see how well the sword cut. And also, cut test, you exercise your technique. Or you can do medieval fencing, which is fencing against another person. Of course, you don't go for killing them. Typically you wear protective equipment so you won't get hurt. And then, wins the person who hits the other person the most times, just like in Olympic fencing, for example. So you can do that too. Or do cosplaying or reenactment battles, which are sort of like, it's not really fencing. You pretend you're fighting against someone.
What is the most expensive type of steel?
To be honest, I wouldn't know. I'm not sure. Carbon steel is more expensive than stainless steel. But I think there are some different kind of alloys that you can choose from, chrome, vanadium. But I wouldn't know which one is the most expensive.
Probably something that's used in some kind of space technology. But I think that in context of medieval swords, then probably something that somebody has made it themselves, like Terry Pratchett went out, kind of excavated by hand some iron ore, melted by himself,
Yeah.
and made sword for himself.
Yeah.
Is there a holy grail of swords that every collector wants to own? I don't know.
Generally, an Albion sword is considered a very, very good sword to own.
But
And
is
it's
there one single in the world that like everybody looks at?
no. It's a brand.
It's a brand.
Yeah.
I thought like
Like one single.
some
No.
some specific.
Probably the real Excalibur, which has never been found. All right. I guess we're covering the whole time. But I wanna see who won the movie challenge. Who's got the highest number of cocktail picks? 5. Anybody's got more than 5? 4. I think Anatoly win. And I have a little present for you. Yeah, there you go. Enjoy it. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.